Okay, welcome and
Just
thank
not.
you for participating, agreeing to do this, and all that. Um, I am going to start with a basic overview that I apologize if it's a little basic and familiar. My target audience with this was actually two of them haven't shown up yet, so in terms of the knowledge level, was a little lower than I think at least two of you here. Um, so before we get into the big question of how to get links to your site, what I wanted to talk about first is why do we even care about links? Because a lot of the SEO blogs I read have, over the last 5-6 years, said links don't matter as much as they used to, and there's a big debate about it. A lot of people don't agree with that. Google, unfortunately, has confused things a couple times by saying they don't matter as much as they used to, and a lot of people took that for granted for a while. And so, why do they matter? Links matter because basically there are only 4 to 5 ways to get people to your website. Right? There's links from other websites. There's when people actually actively go to your site directly. There's ads, and there's the search engines. And if you include social media as a separate group, there's a fifth one. But basically, you have to get traffic to your website somehow, and links are, for many people, one of the main ways they get traffic. But in addition to that, despite what Google and some other SEO people have said, they are still very, very important to the the algorithms that are being used, even though those algorithms are getting so sophisticated, no one can even understand them anymore. Um, at the end of the day, the link is still vital, whether it's official or not, because everything else flows from that. And the reason links are vital is because not only do you get traffic from other websites, but of course, this is why Google is Google. Is they were the first search engine to figure out that if one page linked to another page and that first page was trustworthy in their mind, then that other page was probably also trustworthy. That a link from a site is an indication of trust. So not only do you get traffic, you get basically a vote for your website saying my website is better than otherwise if that link didn't exist, right? So even if that link has not necessarily even been traveled very often, if there's not a lot of traffic flowing through it, the fact that it is even there in the first place is a value, provided the site it's coming from is valuable, which we will get into. Um, but basically, the more links you have from very reputable, but even semi-reputable websites, or just average websites, the better, all of the things being equal, the better your site will do in the search engine rankings, which means you will get more traffic, which means your site will have more traffic, means essentially that depending on what your goals are, your conversions should in theory go up, or what have you, depending on what the purpose of your site is. So they are very important, and even though people say they're less important because there's all these other ranking factors that the algorithms are including now, it's hard to the it's hard to envision the internet without them. Still to this day in 2018, even though some people have said they're not important, and they they contribute in so many other ways to factors that are in the rankings that it's hard to really discount them in any way. They are, you could say it's the most important kind of traffic you could get, but that's debatable. I think direct traffic, people actually typing your URL and going to your site, is probably the very best still. But traffic coming from, say, not that any of us have a website that's ever been linked to from the New York Times, but traffic coming from the New York Times or what have you is pretty damn amazing, even if it isn't consistent. And it's the value of that has not decreased, and I think that it's become more obscure maybe, but it is not it's not decreased. So they are still vitally important, and that is, I think, going to be true even with all the changes that are happening right now, like with AI. Even though AI may affect how how search queries rather are interpreted and stuff, it's hard to imagine links not coming into factor, like into the decisions that the algorithms are that Google's AI is making on its own, because it still needs to figure out. It could be a very distant future when maybe the programs get so smart that they can figure this stuff out without the aid of sites linking to each other. But that is a far distant future as far as I'm concerned. I mean, hopefully anyway. So I think in the meantime, even with those big changes that have been going on, it's important to talk about how to get these links. So that being said, the meat of this is how do you do that in 2018? And it's not that different than it's ever been in terms of the basic process. It's way harder. It's been way harder for the last 10 or 15 years than it has initially. I mean, initially it was when Google was first, invented. Links were often very, very easy to get, and today it's not so much that it's difficult necessarily. It's just can be very time consuming, and this is, I would say, for me personally, one of the things that I struggle with myself in terms of getting results is just the grunt work that has to go into this is a pain in the ass, and it's not something I like, and it's much easier to do other things, as you will see. So does anyone have any questions so far about just the importance of links right now or anything like that? It looks like no. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about how you get links in 2018. And there's it sounds like a really easy process, but I'm going to go through each step. It's not. So the first thing is you need something on your website that someone would want to link to, which sounds really, really obvious, which we'll just call content to be lazy. And then, of course, that content needs to be accessible to I mean, I know this sounds obvious, but that content needs to be accessible to everyone. So in this day and age, that means not just desktops. It means mobile phones, and that should hopefully is not a problem for anybody here. Hopefully we all have responsive websites. And obviously needs to be indexable by search engines. And so that is, should go without saying, but I feel it's important to say it. And then the next step, the hard part, is telling people about it. And finally, in theory, provided you've done everything correctly, you get links. And that's it. That's all it is. It's 4 steps, really 3 steps, if your site is already in good shape. And it seems really, really simple until you try to do it. And then it's not that it's difficult, complicated. It's just that it's effort. And it's an effort, a kind of effort that is not always rewarding and fun. So the first step, of course, is creating some kind of piece of content for your website. Because unless you have some really, really interesting website, you are not going to attract people to your homepage or your About Us page or your contact page. Like nobody's going to link to that, right? Like unless I am reselling. I don't know why I'm even thinking of this, but say there was some reason for me to link to the contact information of the dentists near me or something like that might make sense. And they might get links that way because someone is, say, doing a directory of dentists. But like, otherwise, they're not going to link. Most people are not going to link to just a page on your site that you put up because you felt like you should have it. So you have to create some kind of content that is valuable to somebody, preferably lots of people, and preferably something that is more valuable than other content. So what can it be? It can obviously, I think we're all familiar with the main types of content. You know, there's text, there's podcasts, but this isn't exactly a podcast that you would be doing. You'd be hosting some kind of audio, which could be a podcast. And then there's images and video. And images were really trendy a few years ago with infographics. The problem with infographics, among other things, and the reason why they kind of died out, is because they're shareable in a way in which there's no requirement of anyone to really credit you. So even if you build a big, say you did a big map of the world showing every hydroelectric dam in the world for some reason, and it went viral for some crazy reason, and you branded it with, let's pretend that I have any design bone in my body, and I branded it like RileyHaas.com or something like that. Just because it says RileyHaas.com on the thing, and people pinned it and did all this stuff with it, doesn't mean that anyone's actually going to go to my site. And the number of people actually do go to my site are probably very, very little in that case. And so infographics have kind of like, they're no longer in vogue really as much as they were. There's a big craze. I know I was requested to create some for a client, and which I kind of thought was interesting. They're way less popular now. Podcasts be the current trend, though podcasts are in many ways a lot superior to infographics. So the question is, you do a video, do you do a one-off podcast or some kind of audio file? Do you do an infographic, like an image with information in it, or do you do text, or you do some combination thereof? What you do would depend on what you are trying, what your page is about, your topic is about, what you're trying to convey. And that obviously, it's parallel would be social media. Do you need an Instagram account for your business? And the answer to that is, well, what's your business? And if you're a bakery, you need an Instagram account. If you're a restaurant, you probably need an Instagram account. If you're a dress manufacturer, you need an Instagram account. If you're like me and you try to teach people how to get better at doing their own online marketing, I don't need an Instagram account. There's nothing that I can really do with it that's worthwhile, that's going to benefit me. And so the same thing would be with the content you're trying to create. If the content has a visual component, maybe you should go the way of video or images. But if not, then maybe just images should support it. Now, that being said, having images in general is a good idea because just text, unless the story is really, really good, having just text is a problem because most people will get bored. And all of this is the basics of content marketing, really, but that's not what we're talking about today. So it's just sort of a general overview. But it's important because that's essentially, in order to get links, you do have to do some content marketing. You need to find out if the topic's been covered already. And if the topic has been covered already, you need to make a decision to either not cover that topic, to cover a really niche version of that topic, or the other option, and perhaps in some ways the easiest, in some ways the hardest option, is to outdo everyone else on the topic. It's easy because you have a bottom to start from. what the standard is and you know what you're trying to beat. Whereas if you're covering a topic that really doesn't have much out there, the bottom is so low that you might just do a really shitty job. You know, and you know, if you're trying to, if I'm a barber and I'm trying to attract links to, you know, I'm like a bespoke barber. I don't even know if that makes sense, but like, you know, I'm doing some really old, like straight razor shaving or something, and I'm trying to attract people with a piece on like on antique razors for some reason. If I'm doing that and there's nobody else out there, I don't even know where to, like, what the threshold is to really get popular. Whereas someone else has already got their razor article out there, I can use that as a standard. The problem is that if that razor article is really, really good, then I have to exert a lot more effort into beating it, because it's older, so it's already going to be, it's already going to have links. It's already going to have search traffic. Google knows about it. Google knows people like it, assuming people do like it. And so there's a whole other threshold you have to beat in addition to the quality of the article, which is that you need to make your article more valuable than the pre-existing one. But it is, you know, it has, just like anything in life, it has positives and negatives associated with. Finally, whatever you do, it should, an attempt should be made to make it quote unquote evergreen. Evergreen is something that lasts a long time, and preferably forever, though, you know, that's, who knows what's happening in the future when the robots take over the world. So doing like, you know, current events and stuff like that is a problem. As much as that information might be great, and as much as if you beat someone else somehow, you manage to beat someone else to having the first information about, you know, Drake's new clothing launch or whatever, that will not last very long. And whatever attention you will get, you will only get briefly. And it's even possible that links to the out-of-date content will end up disappearing because pages to your content will eventually be removed from the sites because they're not important anymore. So the more you can do to make your piece of content, whatever it is, more permanent, the more likely that it will succeed in the long run. Because one of the things to think about here is, just because you don't get links in the first week or something doesn't mean you won't get links later. I've seen many pieces of content start off really poorly, and eventually they're discovered, and, you know, in years they start getting hundreds of thousands or millions of views. And sometimes it just takes a really long time, but it's, if the content can stay up or be updated in the future really easily and or repurposed or whatever, then it's definitely better than not. And so those are the general guidelines. You know, this isn't about content marketing, so we're not going to get into any more detail about that. But that's basically what you want to keep in mind to create the content. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the next step? Okay, looks like no. So next up is launching that content online. This is basic stuff, I should say, but like, it's still important to think about. If you have written an article, that article should be put up in a way that is accessible to the world. I've had a few older people ask me about whether or not PDFs are a good idea for their content, and I reacted in horror, and they didn't know why. And I mean, it depends, right? Like, some things are better in PDF. If you have a really long, you know, if it's getting into book length and you have all those custom graphics, then PDFs might make a lot of sense, and you want to distribute in that format. And you never want to change it. You know, it's a big part of it. But if you're thinking you're going to be changing it all the time, that would be a big mistake to publish it in a PDF. You know, if you've made an audio or a visual piece, you want the place you put it on your site to have other text, right? Like, it's one thing to make a video and maybe use YouTube to host a video. Maybe you use a different service, a pay service or something, because some people claim they want the so-called link juice from themselves, and they don't want YouTube taking it. But, you know, if you just put that up on a page by itself, it's not going to get discovered very quickly. You know, you need, say, the video transcript or something like that in the page, so that there's something. I mean, the search engines are getting smarter and smarter, but they're still not at a point where they're just going to magically discover what your video is that you put up, especially if you're hosting it on some obscure video platform. You should also think seriously, if you have made an audio or video file, about where to store it. I am a big proponent of YouTube, despite the supposed drawbacks of it, just because it functions as a dual search engine, right? Like, in addition to it being hosting it for you, and you not have to host the video yourself or pay someone to host it, people use YouTube as a search engine and have been for years. And so they might find your video that way, even if your whole intention is not to have that video anywhere but on your webpage. As long as it's public, people will find it and then find you. So the big things are that the content needs to be accessible to people, and it needs to be accessible to the robots, and it needs to be findable by the robots or searchable. And because, you know, we have sitemaps for a reason, so you can put it in your sitemap. You can submit that to Google if through Search Console, formerly Webmaster Tools, if you are getting impatient with the fact that it's taking them forever to index it, which happens for, I think, a lot of people. You know, and it's worth, you know, depending on what type of, I think we're all WordPress users here, but, you know, if you've made a page, maybe you want to include that page somewhere on your site in addition to your sitemap. If it's a post, it will probably just go to your all posts page if you've got that set up. But it's important to try to put as much indication that it's there as possible. So, you know, one thing would be, if you put a lot of effort and time and money into this piece, you should link to it from your own site. You know, you should point to its existence. It's not a bad thing, you know. Some people have. There's one of the many. I'll share a video with you guys at the end. That's like one of the myths that have been around link building for a very long time, is like that there are these certain rules that you can't violate, and one of them is like you're not allowed to link to your own stuff, which is like idiotic. Like, what? We all link to our own. Like, your sites are just links, you know, like everything is linked together. It's absurd, but people believe this for a very long time. And, you know, if it is text, try to get some graphics if you're interested. I know a great resource for free graphics, a couple great resources for free graphics. They're not great graphics, but they're free. You know, and it's important to think about the presentation in addition to the accessibility, but the accessibility is pretty key, especially now with mobile phones dominating search to the extent that they are. You want everything accessible to phones as much as possible. So that is the part about putting content online. Now is the fun part, and that is telling people about this thing that you created. And this is it's really frustrating if you're not lucky. If you're lucky, then it's really, really easy. So there's basically the easiest, most obvious way of telling people about your content. We all know it's posting it on social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or, God forbid, Google Plus or Instagram or Pinterest or any of these things, or YouTube if you consider YouTube social media, though I don't know that we do anymore. The issue with this, specifically with regards to the big social media networks of Facebook, Twitter, I have to include Google Plus, even though it's funny, and LinkedIn, especially for LinkedIn for small business owners, is that, of course, your content essentially disappears, right? It goes down outside of people's feeds really quickly, unless someone interacts with it, unless they like it or share it on Facebook or comment on it on Twitter, unless they heart it or retweet it or respond, and unless they +1 it or comment on it in Google Plus, and say, if they like it or comment on it on LinkedIn. If they do those things, it stays. And the other thing is, I'm sure you all know, is that it appears anyone who likes or shares or comments on this, provided their settings are set a certain way, and most people's are, then people within their world that you were not connected to start seeing it, which is how something goes viral. And even if your content doesn't go like really properly viral, if people are occasionally liking it or sharing it or commenting on it in social media, then you essentially have that link for as long as that is happening. The problem is if no one reacts to it or people barely react to it, then you lose it essentially. I mean, it's still there somewhere. I mean, I'm pretty sure if I scroll down far enough in Facebook, I'm going to find stuff that I was sharing from, maybe even years ago. How much of it, I don't know. I don't know if it's 100%. I really doubt it. But it's effectively not there. And because, you're better off in terms of the links with Twitter, as much as that might seem unlikely because everyone's barraging everybody else with Twitter and your tweet's going to disappear really quickly because Google indexes Twitter, whereas Google does not index Facebook. And Google, of course, indexes Google Plus. So if you are following the strategy, don't leave out Google Plus and Twitter. But you might get a little more oomph from it, even if people aren't interacting, just because Google's indexed them. But if no one's interacting, it's really not valuable. If basically you need, for this to be effective, you need to strike a nerve. And some of that is just the quality of your content, and especially the quality of your hook that you give them in social media. And some of that is luck. In fact, most of it is probably luck. Things I could tell you stories, but I guess I will tell you a little anecdote. There is a article that someone wrote for a company I work for, and it was written in, I don't know, 5 years ago, and it kind of bombed. It didn't really bomb, but it didn't do that well. And 2 years later, someone found it, and it went viral and exploded, and it really, really helped the site. And there was no reason for it. Someone somewhere had found it and shared it, and other people shared it, and it was a article that bothered people. It's controversial a little bit, and it went viral, and it took 2 years, and it was complete luck that someone found it. I'm still not sure who patient zero was in this little chain of events. I don't know who found it first, but it made its way to the right places, and it's still, to this day, it's still getting, I think, in the tens of thousands of views a month, and even though it's not really up to date at all. And so there's a lot of luck to this as well. And you have to think about that when you're investing time in social media with regard to link building, because basically the links from the actual social media sites are essentially ephemeral. They will not last. And the only way you're going to get legitimate long-term links from it is if someone sees it on social media and likes it so much that they decide to link to it, which is an extra, an extra effort. So that is, it's worth thinking about. So, how else do you tell people? If you have a newsletter, that is obviously a really simple way of telling people about your new piece of content. The issue with the newsletter, as you may imagine, is that it gets to people's inboxes. And when it gets to people's inboxes, they have to take the next step. So when you send it out by newsletter looking for links, you are basically you are hoping that someone in your newsletter or more people in your newsletter have websites. And moreover, not only do they have websites, they want to put a link to your content or on their site, or they want to tell people about it. And that is a big assumption, unless, of course, your newsletter is particularly oriented towards something like this. There are link building newsletters out there where you could totally say, hey guys, I wrote this new piece on link building, and they're sending it to all these SEO people. You'll want to link to it, and a bunch of people will. Now, how much that actually happens with regular small business owners and their newsletters, I don't know, because I would assume most of us, the people who receive our newsletters, if we have them, or do not, they either don't have a website, they have a website, and they don't do much with it. So that is the next option. A good option, if you can find it, would be a forum. There are a ton of forums on the internet, as you may know. And if there's a forum or many related to your business, a good option for sharing links, or sorry, getting links rather, would be, oh, sorry, there's a question that I just missed. I'm sorry. Will says, oh yes, so Will is asking, when I said like it so much on social media that they link to it. Yes, what I meant was they would author a new post, or they would include a link to it in a related article. So say I, to use my stupid barber example again, say I'm a aficionado of weird old antique barber equipment as well, and someone shares this thing they did on this razor article. I could conceivably, if I have a website myself, I could decide I want to link to that article. It's possible. If business owners and website owners are on social media, and it is entirely possible that if you write something good enough, or you created something good enough, that they will want to link to it. Or if it's a video or audio file, embed it as well. So forums. Forums are useful. There's a catch here though, and that is that a lot of forums don't allow commercial posts, right? So as a business owner, if you go into a forum and just like you've barely posted in this forum, even though you've sort of been lurking the whole time, you go in there and you post you say, hey guys, I got this article on these antique razors. Depending on the forum, some people might ban you right away or take your post down or any number of things. So you want to know the rules. For example, a forum may let you have a link to your website in your signature, and that's a pretty good indication that that commercial content may be okay, but the best thing to do would be to contact the admin or the person responsible for the boards you normally post at. And the other important thing is to participate in the forum first before you ask about posting your commercial content. Forums are good. They're not perfect. One of the problems being that they get very, very big. And if you post in a place where no one is really talking about, so say you just post your link with a little bit of text as a forum post, and no one ever responds to that, no one ever really looks at it. Yes, you have a link from this large forum that links to lots of other places too, but if no one's ever clicking on it, it is less valuable than, of course, if people were like really, really into it. And this applies as well to the sort of, the area between forums and social media, places like Reddit. Reddit, some Reddits have very strict policies about, not having commercial stuff. On the other hand, some Reddits, they're pretty okay with you coming in, and as long as the thing has value other than you just trying to sell something, the thing you're posting, sometimes they'll let it come in and even plus, even bump it up. And Reddit would be the prime example of these types of sites, but that would be having links from Reddit would be great, generally speaking, because you're going to get more traffic than most other forums for sure, provided people actually like it and approved it. And that is basically Reddit's a best case scenario for those forums and forum type sites. There is also the matter of directories, and directories are have been considered a sort of a bad word in the SEO world for a long, long time. Because at one point, there's millions of them, and many of them are absolutely terrible. But let's say I made a really, really nice high-end video of my barbershop. It is conceivable that a barbershop directory in Toronto would want to link to something like that. Maybe they would even want to embed it on a page that I asked them to put up for my barbershop. If the directory is relevant or even semi-relevant, it's definitely worth thinking about. Directories are not actually all evil. They are evil when they are random collections of links, or when they are very, very spammy, when they are just the sites that are made up of tons and tons of scraped sites and just lists and lists of sites, then yes, directories are bad. But when directories are relevant to what you're doing, they are not bad. They are actually good. And they are particularly good because it's a win-win, right? If you're giving them your information, they get to enlarge the size of their site, and you are getting the link. And now a link from a directory is certainly not as good as it is from like an actual site that people are going to all the time. Most directories are not being, being visited by a lot of people. But it's still worth thinking about. It's something that shouldn't be ruled out. Now, all of that is pretty, typical stuff, I think you'd say, when you're looking into link building. It doesn't involve the hardest part, which is the only really guaranteed way of getting stuff. But before I get to the big one, does anyone have any questions? All right, looks like we're good. Now I realize we're getting close to 9, so I'm going to try to wrap this up as quickly as I can. So I've given you a bunch of link building strategies. None of them are really foolproof. None of them are great. If you're lucky, social media will be wonderful. Forums newsletters I'm really not sold on. Forums are, if you can find the right forum, they may be good. They're not ideal. And then you get to how you really do it, which is basically you need to make a list of who you want to link to you, and you ask. And it is a pain in the ass, and it is frustrating, and you are likely to get ignored a lot, and you might even get a few rejections, though I feel like rejections are less frequent. It's more just ignoring in my experience. But yeah, basically you make a list and you go through the list and you ask everybody. So how do you do that? You do that by figuring out your keywords for your piece of content, whatever it is, and you look for them and you find sites related to those keywords, and or sites that are related to keywords related to your keywords, depending on how big a net you want to cast. And obviously, if you're running a business, you do not necessarily want to deal with your competition. So you would be looking at sites that are not directly in competition with you. Certainly, a lot of people in competition with you would not be interested in linking to you just because they're in competition with you. So that's the first one you can do. And just seeing sites that are not direct competition or not at all in competition, and seeing what they have, and if they're missing, say, something about related to this piece of content you have. The next is to look at who is linking to your competition, which you can use any like backlink checking tool for. And you do that, and when you have a list, you can get a little nefarious and say, and this is this is gray, but I think it's fairly accepted that you can do this. People may not like it, but what you would do is say, I have my silly antique razor article, and I notice that this barbershop directory is linking to my competitor as like the old-timey barbershop in my neighborhood. And I say, well, hey, look, my content's a lot better. My site's better. Maybe it means my business is better. Wouldn't you rather link to me? You can ask. You may get turned down. I mean, the worst thing that can happen, I guess, is that they would then tell your competitor, and you could get a problem. So the barbershop example isn't the best example, but basically you can suggest or request that the site linking to the competitors may be better served by linking to you instead. And there's no law against that. It might be considered dirty by some people, but it is a definite strategy. Then the other thing is to use a broken link checker on these websites, websites related to your keywords, and see if they have any broken links. And if they do, and especially if those links are related, this is also a way for generating new content in the future, by the way. You can come up with content ideas by looking at broken links from sites you want to get links from, and then just creating content for them and saying, hey, look, you linked to that page that doesn't exist anymore. Well, I have a up-to-date version of it that you can link to me. Anyway, you run your broken link checker, and you see if they no longer link to things, or their links are 404ing rather, and you just say, hey, listen, I know you used to link to that razor article, and it's gone. I have one. Would you be interested in doing that? And you basically, that's what you do, and you do it by email. I mean, you could call. That seems like a lot of work. Though I guess if you were really like, if it's a link you really wanted, calling, if you could get someone on the phone who is actually the webmaster or something, calling would be the best way to do it. But that's what you do. You make a list of these sites. You find a way in which your content satisfies a need the site has, whether it's because their links are 404ing or because they haven't covered this area, or because they're linking to a competitor or someone else who is doing a really bad job. And you volunteer your work. And like I said, lots and lots of rejection, or at least being ignored, a little bit of rejection. Success takes a while. I think it probably depends on the frequency and how aggressive you are. Also, when I say aggressive, I mean like how many people you contact, not how aggressive you are in the email. I think we all understand that you should be polite, and it's a request. They are doing you a favor. The big thing to think about, though, is you want your stuff to be good enough that they want to do it, right? If they don't, if the piece isn't good enough, then maybe they're not going to be interested, even if it's a matter of like they're already linking to something that's not very good and yours is a little better. If it's not great, they may not bother. So why do this instead of the other things? Well, the links from these websites, especially if these websites are well-trafficked websites, they're going to be there for a long time, unless the webmasters delete the page that they're on or pages that they're on. And if the pages they are linking from are reasonably evergreen content, then you can assume the links are going to be there. And those links, are as discussed at the beginning, those links are basically trust signals telling Google and Bing that your site is worth it, and maybe more important than other sites in your industry. My big question for everyone before we go is, do you have a piece of content already that you think is valuable enough that you could do this with? And don't need to tell me, but I'm just saying it's something you should think about. Is there something on your site, or that you could put on your site rather easily, that would be something you'd actually be willing to email another webmaster about and say, would you be willing to link to me for whatever reason? It's something to think about. It's something to stew on. And if you don't have it, the next question is, can you create it? How do you create it? And that's obviously a much bigger question if you don't have it. But anyway, so with that, that's all I have to say on the subject for the moment. I am going to open this up to questions. We can either you can either type them, or I can turn on everyone's mics and we can talk, whichever you prefer. I'm good. I'm not seeing anyone typing, so I'm going to turn on the mics. Try to turn on the mics in the case of Jeff. I can't turn on your mic. Can you turn on your mic? So does anyone? Oh, there we go. Questions. Jeff says, "What is the most successful way of getting links you have used?" I mean, the request way is far and away the best way. It's the most consistent. You're going to get results. It may take a really long time. I've gotten more traffic through things going viral, but that is luck. I believe strongly, mostly luck. And you need people to find it for things to go viral. And one of the ways they will find it is if stuff, the more links you have to your content, especially from sites that receive traffic, the more likely that content is going to appear to not just the users of those websites, but also to people in Google, right? Like your search position is related to the number of links that you have. Like it's not anywhere near as clear as it used to be. It used to be there was a huge correlation between #1 search results for a keyword and links coming into that article. That is not true anymore. There's still a fairly significant correlation there. Asking is the best way. It is a pain in the ass. I don't do it as much as I should, and I am, I'm gonna first person to tell you that. I don't like doing it personally, but it is the best way. And yes, and asking does get results. The problem is, sometimes you have to ask 100 people to get one. I would say that it's usually not that bad. The key thing to it is to target carefully, right? You need to think about who you're asking before you ask. You can't just I can't just write a blog post or write my knife article and go to the New York Times and be like, hey, link to me. That's not how this works. It needs to be, you need to do the research of the websites and say, are these websites, why would this website be interested in what I have to offer? And one example is local, right? You have, if your business is only centered in Toronto, for example, then it makes sense to look at not just businesses in your industry or sites related to your industry rather, but sites related to your industry with a focus on Southern Ontario or Toronto. It makes more sense to do that. And you got to narrow down the funnel. And that is, takes a while. That's more of the effort than the actual emails. It's the emails are.
I'm sorry, I have my headphones on.
Oh, I'm gonna mute.
I don't know, for 20 minutes. If you're tired, go on up and I'll be right behind you.
Hold on, they're muting Will. Okay, there we go. Yes, so does that answer the question, Jeff? Okay. Anybody else? Okay, if no one else has any other questions, then I think we're good. Thanks. Oh, I hear someone else. Anyway, thank you very much again for participating. I really appreciate it. This has been as helpful to me as it was to you. I swear. This is my second time ever doing this, and I am. I'm just practicing, so it's great to have people help me out on it. And thanks again for participating. I hope you learned something.
No problem. Thank you for having this. By the way, you didn't answer the one question, which is how can I do this without any work? But I kind of figured that wasn't a real question.
Well, that's the problem, right? Is the only way you can do that without any work is if it goes viral, and then But I mean, what are the odds of that happening? They're not great because everyone's trying to do that, right? Everyone wants that to happen. So,
yeah,
I will. Before we go, just let me tell you that I, in another aspect of my life, I write a lot. I've published a few books, and I'm working on a fourth. And I wrote something esoteric about Western philosophy, and that had not that much to do with the book I was writing, but I had to get out of my system that day.
Yeah.
And it became the most viewed thing of anything I wrote for that. And I couldn't have possibly predicted it because it was super esoteric. It was about Plato. And it went mini viral, right? Like it didn't really go viral, but it went I mean, I got, I don't know how many comments and reads and all these things. It was on Medium, which is why I was talking about reads. And it was just it was out of control for a week or two. And I was shocked because I was like, who wanted to read this? Yeah. It made no sense to me. And so I bring that up before we go, just by saying that everyone thinks they know what will go viral, but nobody really knows. And it's really hard to guess. And that's why asking for links is a better strategy, because if you just create tons and tons of content and throw it against the wall and hope, it might work, it might not. Whereas if you ask people to link to you, you're actively, especially if you've targeted those people and you've found people who are run websites who have the potential to be interested in what you've done, that is something you can actually tangibly do. Whereas if you're waiting for something to go viral, who the hell knows? I mean, it might, but chances are it won't, or it'll be something that you never thought anyone would ever be interested in, that turns out to be the thing that is a hit.
Right.
All right. Anyone else have any questions, or? Okay. Thank you again. And, yeah. All right. Thanks again. And, yeah, I'll be in touch probably about another one. All right.
Okay.